Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Real Talk, Mindful Health Real Talk. I am Jenny Ma, and I have joining me today Brian Sheppard, Mr. B.A. Sheppard himself from Relation Fit Farms. Is that correct?
That is correct for the
Yeah.
time being. There's a little change that's happening. It's going to be so much easier. But we can talk about that because I think it could be a topic that we could talk about today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I love that. Change is always good and
Yeah,
it's tough, but welcomed. And yeah, so hi, Brian. How are you? Thanks for joining me tonight.
I'm fantastic, Jenny. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I always love talking to you. It's always a great conversation, and tonight we're going to be talking about something that a lot of people, a lot of us deal with on a short term or long term basis, and that is fear, fear and overcoming fear. And there's varying degrees of fear, from just feeling anxious about something to feeling trepidatious about something to having a real sort of a phobia about doing things, going places, being around certain people and situations and circumstances. And so what I hope to talk about today is maybe it's just some ways to navigate through fear, and maybe some of your own experiences with fear and how you've overcome that, and what you found to be a great progressor in your life.
Okay, that sounds good. Fear is definitely one of those topics that we all face. I mean,
Hmm.
no one's exempt from having to face fears in their life, and it can be pretty paralyzing. I mean, fear
Mm.
can keep you from a lot of experiences, and I try to approach fear uh, with the mindset of, if I'm afraid of something, I need to do it. I need to figure out how to get closer to it, and that's kind of just one of the basic rules that I operate with now. Um, that I don't like being afraid.
Mm.
I do not like it, because I know that there's something on the other side of the fear, right? Something beneficial for me, some experience, something that I can learn, something that I can share with someone else. And ultimately, we only have a few breaths in this life, right? And so
Yeah.
I don't want to, I call it like dying while you're breathing. I do not want to die while I'm breathing.
Mm.
I want to live. I want to feel the experience. I want to have the experience. And and every time it grows you, it develops you, and it changes you. And so that's something I've, because let me just say this, I'm more of a cautious person.
Okay.
So being
So define
if
that, cautious, being cautious. Define that a little bit.
being afraid.
Okay. Okay.
Right,
Okay.
so like that's how I used to couch it, like, oh, I'm cautious, I'm very calculated in what I'm doing. In other words, I'm afraid of making the mistake. I'm
Mm.
afraid of being exposed. I didn't want
Mm.
people to judge me, right? there
Mm.
was there was ultimately, in the background,
Right.
there's a fear.
Right.
And I got tired of it. I got tired of fear bullying me, right? Just
Yes.
like it's a bully.
It's a
And
bully.
right.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
I got tired of it. And so my way of fighting back was, no, I'm going to do something about this.
Mhm.
So there's still some things that, like, I'm a little bit, okay, a bit afraid of swimming with sharks, but I want to do it.
Okay, well, there's yes. I mean,
Right.
that's a very fair
Yeah.
fear. Yeah, sure. I
But
mean,
it's one of those things that I do want to do because
yeah.
I know I'm afraid of it. I know,
Yeah.
I'm like, but put me in one of the cages. Let's start there, and let's move forward. I did swim with dolphins, so that was like a step in the right direction.
That's great. I've done that. That's quite magical, I have to
Yeah, it
say.
is. It
Yeah,
is.
it's an interesting experience. I love what you said, because a few things that you said kind of resonated with me, and one of them is when you're afraid of something, you want to move towards it, and I think that's so key. And I'm always telling clients, what they when they ask me, I'm afraid of this, what do I do? And my answer is always the same. It's do it afraid. do it afraid, because as you said, you're going to miss out on what could happen. And I myself am all about the experience of life. So I never want to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I had done that. I want to say, oh, I did that and that was great. Or, oh, I did that. And you know what? It really sucked. I don't recommend it. But at least I
Right.
had the experience of doing that. Right. So moving towards fear, and that's the key. That's how you live. That's how you thrive. That's how you survive. If you stay where you are, the moment you stop thriving and learning and growing, you're dead. And as as time progresses, I'm very aware of the ending of things. And I mean, I'm not I'm still quite relatively young, but as you get older, time sort of tends to go by a lot quicker, and the people around you tend to dissipate and fade, and your circumstances change, and your life changes, and your thought process changes, and maybe if you go through a lot of healing, your character changes, and that changes your environment. So moving towards fear is something is progressive, um, and something that is required and needed. And a certain amount of fear is healthy, is what keeps us alive. It keeps us excited. It gets those endorphins going, right? It gives us that adrenaline rush, right? That natural high. And when we accomplish something, there's a famous saying, I think it was Muhammad Ali. He said, it always looks impossible until you've done it.
Right.
Right. And so that's kind of sort of where fear sits. And that's, things look scary until you go through them, until you accomplish them, until you go forward, until you aim at it. And sometimes you don't even know where you're aiming. But the point is you just point and shoot, point and shoot, point and shoot. Eventually you're going to hit something, and then you go in that direction, and that takes you, on another path to discover something new. Um, and I think what you said too, personally, about fear being something that held you back, in terms of not wanting to be exposed, or not wanting to be bothered, or not wanting to sort of wanting to stay in that sort of self-contained, self-made cocoon, if you will. And I'm not putting words into your mouth, but that's how I would
Yeah.
sort of, that's how I heard it a little bit. But that's, I think that's such a it was so important that you said that, because I think that's such a big fear for so many people. And I know that for me, in my life, there have been times when things have happened that I have certainly been embarrassing for me to go through. But what I realize is that I was kind of sort of put in those situations, with my divorce. I kind of didn't really want to talk about it. And it's not that I was afraid of people finding out, but I guess it was a little sort of, I didn't want to hear that, oh, I told you so. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was a period of time. That was a space and time. And when you heal from that and you get through it, it's like, oh yeah, I've been divorced. Yep. Like, you
Right.
don't let it hold you back, right? You don't let things hold you back from experiencing new things. So I wonder, in that aspect, what were some things that you did for yourself, or that you told yourself, or what were some ways in which you forced yourself, if you will, forward, pushed through that fear?
I think one of the things for me, because I love myself, I do
Mm,
love myself, right? So
good.
this is one of the things that for me has become very important. I believe when you love yourself, you can have a different level of conversation with yourself, like raw, honest,
Mm,
without totally breaking yourself down. And so because in that healing process of, you know what, I'm tired of being bullied, right? Because that it
yeah.
robs you, right? So that robs you,
Mm,
that beats you up. And so when you're beat up as it relates to fear, you have to heal from that as well.
mm,
And so in that healing process and loving on me, I started to be very honest and started to look at the things that I was afraid of and the outcomes, really, because it's not the thing, it's the outcome. Like
mm.
what's going to happen after. I had a conversation with myself and said, "You're really not that important." like, 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 no one knows you. Okay, like Don't
Mm.
stop worrying about other people's opinions. You're not famous. It doesn't even matter. Even if you were,
Right.
I start having that conversation, and I'm
Right.
thinking, like, you're stop making like that's too much ego, right? It's too,
Mm.
you're being too consumed with yourself, thinking that your fall, your debacle, your failure is coming up on everyone's timeline and across every news channel. It's not.
Mhm.
And if it does, so what? Right? Just
Yeah.
so I started being really honest with myself, saying, all right, so people talk about you. Okay. So people laugh at you. Wouldn't be the first time. And so as I look at it, I was thinking, who's being robbed of the experience?
Mm.
Oh, I'm the only one being robbed of the experience.
Mm.
I remember looking at people. Obviously, I don't have hair right now, but I remember looking at people that would like dye their hair different colors and purple and green and multicolor. And I would look at those people and I just admire them, like because that person is living in their skin, and they, to me, on the outside looking in, they don't care. They're just doing
Yeah.
their thing.
Mhm.
So I admire that, and what I started to do was I wanted to be around courageous people. I wanted to be around people doing things that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
For instance, riding the horses. When I started off with horses, I started off with a miniature horse because my daughter wanted a horse. I didn't know anything about horses, so I
Yeah.
went and found the smallest one possible.
Mhm.
And so what happened was, of course, I would say, "Yes, I have a horse. I have a horse." People didn't know it was the smallest horse around. And one day a guy said, "Oh, you want to come riding with us?" And I really didn't know how to ride because I never really had ridden before, except maybe a
Yeah.
couple times here or there. And I was like, "No, I'm good." I wanted to, but I was afraid of falling. Right? I'm
Mhm.
afraid of getting run away with the horse because I didn't know. And he was like, "Oh, no, no, here we have a horse for you." So he puts me up on the horse, and they're playing this game called pony tag, where you're essentially playing tag on horses. So
Mhm.
not only am I on this horse, but now we're moving around at a nice pace and moving. And so being in that situation forced me to to have an experience, right? Because I didn't back off. I wanted to do it. So instead of saying no and making the excuse, I said yes and I did it. And it pushed me forward. So being around people that were doing things that I wanted to do opened me up to an opportunity. And so I encourage people, even when they do come to the farm and they say, I'm so afraid of horses." Well, one thing we'll do is we'll stand outside of the barn.
Mm.
I'll ask someone, "Are you afraid of the horse out here in the parking lot?" "Oh, no, 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 it's fine." "All right, let's start moving into the barn and you tell me when you become afraid."
Mm.
Right?
Yeah,
And
the
then
gradual process.
right. And so when
Yeah.
that fear shows up, like perhaps soon as we're getting close to the barn doors, someone might say, "Well, I feel afraid now." And then we'll start talking about it. "Well, what do you feel afraid about? There's no horse within, you know,
Mm.
there's nothing out there. You can't see them even."
Perceived fear of
Right.
something unknown. Yeah.
Right. And
Mm.
so as you start working towards it and you start identifying, okay, I feel afraid here. Let me start let me start being curious. Why? What am I afraid of? Am I afraid of injury? Am I afraid of
Mm.
being ridiculed? Am I afraid of being exposed for not knowing? And then dealing with it and actually saying, well, I'm afraid people are going to think I don't know what I'm doing. Well, that's part of having a new experience,
Yeah,
right?
we all
So
start somewhere. Yep.
right, so like give yourself the grace to be a novice. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm afraid of being hurt. Okay, that's realistic. Let's find out what can you do to put yourself in safe situations. And so instead of just blowing by what has you afraid, I believe that being curious is very important in the process. Like move towards where you want to go and be
Mm.
curious as to what you're telling yourself so that you can expose it and deal with it.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah, and that's a key thing too, moving towards the where you want to go in life. We're not saying that, uh, because you're afraid of something, just jump all in wholeheartedly. Like if you're afraid of, doing drugs, that you should jump in and do a bunch of cocaine.
Right.
That's just stupid. That's just dumb. It's not all fears, right?
Right, right,
We're not saying, fear based in terms of things that are harmful for you, but things that are will nourish your life and your growth, things that are experiential, things that will add to who you are as a person and build on your life skills and teach you something, and lessons learned that you can then turn around and teach other people too.
right,
And and that fear, that gradual fear that you talk about, that perceived fear is really what it's all about for people. Is okay, well, we have this concept of what, we aren't naturally afraid. We aren't naturally afraid of something. It's just not, when a baby is born, it's not naturally afraid to roll over. It's not naturally afraid to eat something. It's not naturally afraid to do whatever babies do. A fear is sort of a learned process. And so where is that fear coming from? Who told us that this is dangerous? Maybe somewhere along our lives someone said, well, horses are dangerous if you fall off of them. So without having a person even met a horse or seen a horse or gotten on a horse, already they've built up this story in their mind that, well, if I ever come across a horse, I know they're dangerous because I could fall off.
right,
They've gotten to the end game without having the beginning or the
right,
middle, or
right,
the enjoyment of the interaction. So
right.
yeah, so I think that gradual process, and I know for me, I used to, as a younger person, I used to be a very second time around was best for me. So I would be so nervous about doing something, but I would always do better second time around. And I think naturally I had a very self-deprecating sense of humor, and I think that helped because anything that I do in life, I try to do well, and I try to do to a level of perfection that I have determined is perfection for me. Um, and I spent a lot of years as a dancer growing up and in theater, and so I'm very comfortable on stage. But when you're young, you step out on the stage and it's the lights are bright and the sound is loud, and I remember a couple of instances where I got on stage and I just said, "Oh, I hope there's a distraction, or I hope there's a mistake, or I hope, because then I can just step back and take a breather and then come back on stage." And sure enough, the music cued was off and they had to start again. So I had to come back on, and there was a noise or something fell and people giggled, and I just thought, okay, I had this breath of like, okay, it doesn't have to be all perfect. You go with the flow. And so that sort of allowed me to overcome that fear. And I to this day, I'm much more comfortable, you know, speaking in front of thousands of people. I mean, I am more comfortable, just me on stage speaking to thousands of people, than I am in a boardroom speaking to three other people. That makes me nervous as heck. That I mean, you still hold your own, but it's just, it's a little, the dynamics are different, right?
Right, right,
Because you feel, it's funny because you feel like, for me at least, I feel like when I'm talking to, say, 1,000 people, um, I'm there by myself.
right,
When I'm faced with three people across, a boardroom, I'm like, why are you looking at me?
right.
So it's a very different feel. It's a very
Yeah,
different feel. But I wanted to touch a little bit on what you said earlier about eh, having that feeling that, everyone's watching you or thinking something of you or laughing at you, or that feeling that you're on everybody's social media reel or feel. And that's so important because I think that is and I feel like social media does play a big a much bigger part in it now in today's society. But even before, I think, you growing up, you think when something happens to you, you think either all the kids at school are going to laugh at you, or when you're, in your 20s and 30s, you think, oh, everybody around you is just going to know your business, and then everyone's going to, get down on you. And I recently had a client. This was one of the topics that came up, and I said to them, I said, well, how many people do you know? I said, let's just say 20 people. Do you know 20 people? Yeah. Do you know 50 people? Like, personally, who know you, that you know them? Do you know 50 people? Well, maybe. Okay, great. Do you know 100 people? No, I don't know 100 people. Okay. Do you know everybody in your current city and subdivision? No. Do you know everybody in your town or in your province? No. Do you know everybody in your country or anybody else in your country that knows you? Some people. Okay, some. Do you know how many people are in this world? 7 billion people living in this world, growing exponentially every day. People are not stopping having babies, right?
Right.
I said, do you know right now there are people in the Philippines who don't know you? And so it becomes very isolating, this thought that we think that with story that we tell ourselves that, oh, if I do something and I make a mistake, everybody's going to know about it and my life is over.
Right.
It's so not true.
Right.
It's so not true. We maybe know 100 people, half of them don't care.
Right.
You know? It really
Right.
it really really doesn't. And so we inflict this this self-imposed fear on ourselves, and like you said, it really limits us. It really limits our own experience, because even worst case scenario, if someone were to judge you, which I think is, in and of itself a flaw, because how can we judge others when we ourselves are flawed? Um, but even if someone were to judge you based on a mistake that you've made, 5 minutes later they're going on with their life, and they could give two craps about you and what you're doing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And you're sat there tormented and in this turmoil, thinking, oh, so and so is going to think this of me. They don't pay your bills.
Right.
They don't write your story. They're not going to pick you up when you're stranded over there. They're not, like, we put so much importance on people who have no control over our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's this notion that our embarrassment now is amplified, right? Like, in school back in the day, depending on how old people are, you might have, okay, you got rejected by the girl. You didn't get
Mhm.
her number. The guy didn't want you, whatever. You get broken up with. And yeah, like 5 people know.
Yeah.
But now, someone has the capability of posting it or sharing it, and it can be embarrassing. But I think it goes back to something that you pointed out earlier. You said on the stage in front of thousands of people, you're very comfortable.
Mm.
In the boardroom with maybe 3 people, it's a lot more uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I think that has to do with the power. Like, there's a struggle of power actually.
Mm.
With 3 people in a room, the power struggle becomes more intensified because it's focused in one area. And when you're on the stage with thousands of people, it's kind of just dispersed because I don't know all these people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people we put ourselves in this world of 7+ billion people. We
Mm.
put ourselves in such a small world. We make our world so small that whenever something goes on, the feedback is super loud
Mhm.
because there's only, you know, 2 people around, and they're going to keep on talking about it because they really don't have anything going on in their small world either. And
Yeah.
so I think one of the ways of actually freeing yourself from the fear is growing your world, right? The more you grow your world, you realize just how, like, your mistake, your weird, ways, your quirkiness, your background, your story, you'll find out in the sea of 7 billion people, there are a lot more people like you, right?
Mhm.
But you got to find your odd community. And so, like, the one thing I encourage people to do, and I call it, finding your inner oddball. Like, find your story and, like, everything about it, right?
Mm.
The ugly parts, the hurtful parts. Find your story, start becoming more and more familiar with it, start embracing it, and then in one way or another start sharing it,
Mm.
because someone is going to be drawn to you and say, you know, I've been through that too. And I've been looking and I just wished there was someone like me and that I could talk to, someone that I could share this experience with. And so I've been sharing that this is the power of togetherness, right? The
Mhm.
power of togetherness means that we can actually help one another heal by sharing ourselves, right?
Mhm.
This is the one thing some people say, well, I don't have anything to give. The one thing everyone has is their story, right?
Yeah, it becomes a community of a
Absolutely.
community of experiences sort of knit together to fabricate this positive outcome and this universal understanding
Yeah.
where we feel a break in ease in judgment and an influx in understanding and being heard and acknowledged. I
Yeah.
think that's I think especially that's important for I see this all the time for people who come from small towns, right?
Yeah.
So really small towns because everybody knows everybody's business and they fear there's such a need and a want and a desire to hide the things that they do and mistakes that they make and for fear of anybody finding out and it's like, well, okay, but there's other people that live in your town, right? And they have their own lives too, right? And they're not perfect either, right? And so whatever you think someone's got on you, they've made their own mistakes. They've got their own
Yeah.
demons to deal with. So no one is absolved of any wrongdoing or mistakes or slights or any of that or judgments or I mean, we all have our ups and downs, in life, and i- i- it's like you said, it's growing from where you are, where you're situated. You can't, it's like a plant. Well, you know this, right? Like you're a farmer and you know this when you plant something you put it in a pot that will sustain it for a period of time and then
Right.
eventually you have to repot it into a bigger pot or else it will die and that's sort of the same concept is if you stay in this sort of this isolating mindset with just these 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people around you, it can be quite um toxic,
Yeah.
quite toxic. And you have to be able to and be willing to expand beyond sort of, I mean, making friends on social media is great and that's okay, but you need to expand your circle geographically,
Yeah.
I think, which is important.
I fully agree with that. I'm a person. I enjoy traveling,
Mm,
and seeing new places, going new places, because especially countries where, like, English isn't the primary language.
mm,
Because then, or even being, you don't even have to leave the country. You can find friends. You can find people. You can go to certain restaurants that people don't speak the same language as you, and be there and engage,
mhm,
right? And try to figure out what's going on. Because when you start to expand that way, where you're getting out of your comfort zone, like anything else, when you start developing that muscle,
mm,
that courage to step out of what's comfortable,
yeah,
then you get to grow, right? That you pointed out the farming with the plants. I mean, one of the things that I look at so often, and this helped me a lot, was looking at one single seed. And like a lot of times we look at the seed and it's like, all right, here's a seed. But really, when we're looking at the shell, that is, it can be thought of as a mindset, an experience, relationships, something that is holding whatever's on the inside back, right? You
Yeah.
have to break the shell, right?
Mm,
Like whatever the shell is in your life, like, okay,
the
I'm
barrier.
ashamed of what, yeah, because it's a barrier. I'm ashamed
Mhm.
of what happened to me. I'm ashamed of what I did to someone. I'm ashamed of what
Mm,
they did to me. I, I'm ashamed of what's on what I call my dark resume, right? The stuff that
sure.
I don't want anyone to know about, but it's there in your life.
Yeah.
Well, that stuff, anything can be a shell, even past success can
Mm,
be a shell
very
that's
true.
holding you back from moving forward to, and that's where growth is. If
Yeah.
a seed does not break, if the potential inside this the seed doesn't decide that it's going to break that shell, it never it never experiences whatever it is destined to be.
Yeah, Brian Stevenson, there's a quote from Brian Stevenson, who's a human rights lawyer, and he sits on the Equal Justice Committee. He says, "You are more than the worst thing you've ever done." And I love that. I love that saying because it's an automatic permission to take a breath and realize that we all make mistakes. We all have done things that we are not proud of, or things that we weren't even aware of at the time, that we realize, oh, this might have, you know, hurt someone's feelings, or oh, I should have done this differently, or and that's a part of growing, and that's a part of learning. We don't have the sage wisdom of a centurion when we're 12, right? I
Right,
mean, there are some men and women who are in their 40s and 50s who are not, they're good eggs, but they're not fully cooked yet.
right, 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 right.
So you're more than the worst thing you've ever done. And I love that. I love that analogy, that saying, when I hear it. It's just, it speaks volumes, I think.
I think like, right along with that, I think something that everyone can do is ask themselves, what is that one thing that's holding me back?
Mm,
Like, what's the conversation that I'm telling myself? What's the experience? Like, what is that one thing
mm.
that keeps me back?
And why am I letting it?
Yeah.
Mm,
And because it's the bully
mm.
that is actually like fighting to choke out the life from you,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah.
will keep you back. I remember when I was going through my divorce, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't the only person in the whole entire world that's ever been divorced. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, I'm the only one. This is the worst, right? Let me like,
Yeah.
I'm the worst person ever. I'm divorced. Like this is the worst. And it's amazing how like going through that experience, there were people that all of a sudden I started hearing their stories.
Mm.
It would come out just casual. Oh, when my first husband this. I'm
Right,
like, wait,
right.
you were married more than once? Wait a second. Like, who knew? You're so happily married now. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that there was a prior to this, right? And so everybody has a backstory,
Hmm.
right? But the question is, your backstory is a backstory because it's behind you.
That's right.
So what are you going to
That's
do?
right.
Because, right, if you're listening to this or watching this right now, well, something brought you to this moment so that you can make a decision to live, right?
Mm.
You and I, we've met, we've been interacting, we've been talking, and every time we get together, our lives grow a little bit more,
Mhm.
right? We learn something new, we engage differently, we do something different, and life is happening.
Yeah.
And I think that those that are in your community, people that you're serving and you're working with, that's what makes this experience so rich because a year ago we weren't doing this,
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
This is new. This is a new thing. We stepped into a new experience, and all of us have it, right?
Yeah.
All of us have the experiences that are awaiting us, but we have to say yes to them.
Yeah, and it's so easy for us to make excuses to not push through that fear, right? We can, when you talk about feeling how you felt when you were going through divorce, thinking you're, oh, I'm the only one. This is terrible, and and likewise, we can make excuses for not moving forward. We can say, oh, well, I have kids, or oh, I can't get away because of my job, or oh, I can't do this because I've got to, I mean, kids are, eh, the apple of every parent's eye, right? Um, but I think in times of struggle, sometimes when you're not equipped for self discovery and true healing, they can often become a crutch or an excuse um, to use to not move forward or to not accomplish things and not, well, I can't do that because I have kids, and I think that's a lot to put on your kids.
Right.
That's a lot of responsibility to give them unknowingly, to say, well, because you are in my life, I am unable to be a whole person.
Right.
And I think that's something that people don't realize that they're doing when they say that. I've known many people who say, oh, well, I can't move here, or I can't do this, because I have kids.
Mm,
Well, because you have kids, you get to share those experiences with them. You get to introduce them to new people. You get to introduce them to new places. You get to take them along with you and have them see the world in a different way than they might not have
yeah.
if you were just to stay home, or if you were just to keep going every day the way it is now. Can you see yourself doing this, what you're doing every day for the rest of your life, just the way it is, with no improvement, no change, nothing new, no growth,
Right.
until you die? And then your kids are going to turn around and say, well, my parents never did anything with us.
Right.
So
Right.
so to say, oh, I have kids, it's like, well, no. Because you
Right.
have kids, you get to have so many more experiences than
Right.
you would not have, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I think, we just naturally want, human beings naturally want the easy way out, right?
Right.
We always look for the easy path. We always look for the easy route, the path of least resistance, right?
Right.
So, well, yes, I could accomplish this, but that would mean I have to work out every day.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
or yes, I could go there, but then that means I have to take a different job and something I'm not, necessarily happy with, even though the outcome would be, twice as fruitful 6 months from now.
Right.
It's a little bit of change and adjustment that it just is uncomfortable for us, right?
Right.
And we sort of hold on and have this sort of vision of the next few days in terms of our life story, instead of looking forward and looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah. It's so interesting. The more you kind of step back from it
Mm,
and really look at fear, fear is really the door of opportunity,
so
right?
is.
It
Yep.
is it is the door of opportunity because once you find out that you're afraid of something, like, oh, I don't know what to do, but then you
Mm,
start there's someone that knows how to do it. There's
yeah.
someone that's been there, right?
Yeah.
You just have to if you begin tapping into the possibility, it's a total game changer for life,
Yeah.
right? I can it's funny to me. I think about this often. Like growing up, I- right? I was a guy that women girls talk to, right? They would
Mhm.
talk to me. But I wouldn't I was kind of nervous and awkward and afraid to talk to them like, "Oh, do you want to go to the school dance or do you want to dance with me?" Like that stuff made me nervous, right?
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
would get sweaty palms. I There was a girl I can think of her. I can see her face right now. Whenever she was around, I was a complete mess, right? totally, totally afraid. I mean, I know she was connected to church. So, sometimes in church, you'd be in a
Yeah,
circle, you have to hold hands. And I'm like,
she
oh
got your
my gosh,
goat.
she's going to feel my sweaty hands. And it was the worst. And so now I look at life, and it's just so ironic that, I do women's empowerment,
Mm,
and like I'm very comfortable being
yeah,
around women, talking and sharing, and like I'm still the guy, I'm still the friend that
yep,
you can talk to. But the game changer was finding my own self-worth,
mhm,
right? When I stopped telling myself that I wasn't good enough, like, oh, you're not good enough. Look at her, she's so pretty. What, you're not good enough. And so
mm,
when you tell yourself you're not good enough, you're automatically going to default to a fearful situation, because now you don't qualify. You
mm,
don't qualify for the job. You don't qualify for the date. You don't qualify. You just don't qualify because you don't know enough. You're not smart enough. You're not from the right side of the tracks. Whatever it may be, you're telling yourself that you're not good enough. Self
yeah,
worth goes a long way to building up your courage, because you start to realize, if this goes the way that I want it to go, or if it doesn't,
mm,
it doesn't it doesn't diminish who I am,
that's right.
right? It's me having an experience, but at the core of me, I'm still a caring person, I'm still a loving person, whatever it may be, whatever your core values are. The experience doesn't rob you of that,
Mm,
right? Being divorced, just it doesn't mean, oh, you're not good enough in life, you're a failure. No, it meant I was in an experience that didn't work out, and it didn't kill me either.
mm,
So now it's something that I have to take with me, learn from, grow from, share with others,
mm,
and be enriched by, right? If we can start looking at our past situations, the things that are causing us to be afraid, and say, you know what, even that, it enriched me.
mhm,
I learned something from
the
that.
experience.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
experience. And I
yeah,
think I think experiential learning
mhm,
is I think it's fantastic. I think, it's something that needs to be brought back into school so
extremely
that,
valuable.
kids are they're they're encouraged to try, they're
Mm,
encouraged to fall, they're encouraged to, you know, be laughed at, whatever, go
yeah,
for it, be silly, and have those experiences, because it really does strengthen you. And and like, that's one of the things with my children. Um, Whenever they would fall, they knew what conversation they were going to get. They were going to get, congratulations, you had an experience,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
Dad, I just fell off my bike and I'm crying and my knees. Like, all right, we're going to take care of your knee, but I'm still going to tell you, congratulations, you had an experience.
mhm,
Right?
yep, absolutely.
Congratulations. I'm glad that you weren't afraid,
Yeah,
right? I'm glad that you went for it. And so, when we look at our lives and begin to really identify that this fear, where it comes from, where it is, like, I wasn't afraid of everything, but I do recognize I was afraid of the judgment of people. Like, I would
mm.
ride my bike, and like, I was one of those kids that could like do backflips off of a ramp and stuff like that.
Oh,
It was
wow.
totally nuts. I don't know why I did that, but
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
And so I would do those things. I wasn't afraid of that. But you tell me to go to the board and do the
mm,
math problem,
terrifying.
I'm breaking out in the sweat, right?
Yeah,
I for one used to
sure.
think people are looking at my butt and they're going to say I have a big butt, right? This was because they would say it like,
Which
Brian, you have a
people
big
pay
butt,
for now, so
right?
congratulations, you had an
Right.
experience.
I'm like, it's just my build. Everything is kind of compacted and put together. But it was the fear of being talked about,
Mm, yeah.
and
You know what's crazy psychologically about that is when we have these fears, like, you were saying you didn't feel good enough, right? When we go into something with the mindset of we're not good enough, that is not our thought. That was placed in our minds somewhere along the line by someone else. If we go through a process and we say, okay, I went and I tried this and it didn't work out. And then we have the thought process of, okay, what did I do that wasn't good enough and how can I improve that? That is our own thinking and our own thought process. But going into a situation thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, that is not our own thought. That was put in by someone else. And that is something that is so detrimental to our growth, right? Because it happens without even our knowledge, right? It happens
Mhm.
to us as kids and as youth and young adults without us even knowing it, right? And then we get to the marker, we get up to the podium, we get up to the race, we get up to the line and we think, we get up to that guy or girl and we think, "Oh, I'm not good enough."
Right.
Well, you haven't even had that experience yet. So how do you know that you're not good enough?
Right. Yeah. It's it's I can look back through life and I know we all have it. And
Mm,
I think if we're honest with ourselves, it can make just a huge difference,
mhm,
right? And I know in society right now we don't like to talk about specifics because there's a there's a there's a defensiveness that we have in our society right now as
mhm.
we start to identify people different ways, right? But I'm
Mm.
going to say this because this is my
Say it as it
experience,
is, it's
right?
important. Yeah, it's the well, I mean, the name of the show is Real Talk, so
Right. So
yeah.
I'm gonna give you my real talk,
Yeah,
and so I really, somebody wants to judge it, they can.
sure.
But I can remember, right? You talk about someone making that deposit.
Mm,
Okay, so being in school and like doing well in school, and my dad used to tell me like, "Oh, you have to." My dad told me how I was going to dress. You're going to dress this way. You're not going to turn your head around backwards. Blah blah blah.
right.
Right. So this is how you're going to be in school. This is how you're going to behave yourself. This is. He would tell me, if you want to play baseball, then guess what? You better not bring home any C's on your report card. You can't play. And so in this process, my dad and a lot of people in my family are public speakers. And so in the process, I at times would get ridiculed
Mm,
for being the way that I was,
mm.
right? And like people were like, "Oh, you think you're better than everyone else," right? They're making a deposit,
Okay, so I
or
had the opposite, people thinking you were better than yeah.
right, like, "Oh, you think you're right." I remember there were kids that wanted to fight me
Mm.
because they determined that I thought I was better than them. It had nothing to do with my thoughts. I just wanted to play ball, right?
Yeah,
But
and you were
they,
trying to, reach a level of achievement that was acceptable to your father because you respected him and
right,
you wanted his acknowledgement as a
right,
child.
and that was our standard. That was our standard. My
Sure.
my dad, my sister, she made like she would make all A's, but my dad didn't put that on me. He said, A's and B's. He didn't tell me like he never told me, hey, you're an A student. You don't need to bring home B's. He's like, you don't need to bring home C's, but A's and B's, you can rock out there.
Right.
So he was being honest. But
Yeah.
like, what we hear culturally
Mm,
is important, right? So,
yeah.
someone might criticize, and I hear this a lot now.
Mm,
It's like, oh, well, white people do this, or you're acting black, and so there's these little things. Here, that's a deposit. Oh, you're
mm,
acting like a man. No, no, no. That's not acting like a man simply because you're strong in this way. That no. And so, but when it's said, it somehow starts to put a little thought in our mind that being the way that we are is unacceptable. And so for
mm,
many people, you start hearing those things and you start to turn away from it, and the shell starts to get built, right? Like,
yeah.
oh, okay, so if I do well in school, or if I can articulate myself, or, people would ask me, well, you must be gay because you have all these girls around you and you're not trying to sleep with them.
Mm,
No, no, that's not
yeah.
actually
Or respectful.
right. Like, so like that's not it at all. Like I like talking. I'm like, I
Yeah.
like engaging. Like, it has nothing to do with sex. I'm like,
Right.
I do the same thing with my guy friends. I like to talk.
Mhm.
So, like having conversation. So these things, when they get said, you start to get shaped. Okay, here's this
Mm.
shell being built. And I think um, when you go through, I remember coaches telling me, you're too small, right? We're looking for somebody else that's bigger. I could work as hard. I'd show up early. I'd stay late, do those things. But I remember a coach telling me, we're looking for your replacement. He would tell me year after year, we're looking for your replacement. And
Hmm.
so in my mind, what I was hearing was not good enough, right?
You're replaceable. Yeah.
Right. You're
Yeah.
replaceable. Even though you're working this hard, you're replaceable.
Mm.
And so what I found out was, like, even in marriage, like after a while, I recognized that's a no-go for me,
Mm.
right? That it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me to be told I don't value you, right? And so when that gets said, I at first used to be afraid of
Mm.
standing up for that because I didn't see my own value. So
Right.
really, people were taking advantage of a low standard that I had
Right.
because I didn't see my own standard. I didn't have a high enough standard because I didn't see my own value. And so someone could tell me, "Oh, we're looking for your replacement," and all that kind of stuff, and I kind of just went along with it. Now I internalized it. But
Mm.
as you start to grow your value, it changes, right? I could post something on social media, people can talk bad about it,
Mm.
whatever it may be, but I realized I still had the courage to share, right?
Yeah.
I'm still expressing my thoughts.
Yeah.
And this still has the capability of impacting someone's life. People don't have to agree with me. As a matter
Mhm.
of fact, when they don't agree with me, it makes for engaging conversation because perhaps I can learn a new perspective.
Mm.
And so needing to be, validated by people and all that, somebody could still tell me, I'm looking for your replacement. And I'm gonna say, good luck. like, like, like if you're gonna replace me, good luck. Because
Yeah.
I know that if I'm on your side, I know what I bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And so if you want to
Absolutely.
replace me, hey, I told someone this the other day. You want to replace me, you must have quite a stable if you're just throwing me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to force you to change your mind because you have made your decision, which is fine. I know me. I'll
Yes.
find someone else who will allow me to serve what I have to
Mm.
them. See,
Mhm.
when you recognize your value as a giver,
Yeah. Yep.
it
Yes.
changes. When people don't want you, say it's okay because I'll find someone that I can give to, that I
Yeah.
can share with, that I can encourage, who might look at my life and they see something of worth and value,
Mm.
and they appreciate it.
And your mind and your hands are clear when you walk away, and I think
Sure.
that's so key, and I think I love that because, for me, and I think probably it has a great deal to do with, my childhood, but for me, I am very, very thankful for this piece of my character is that I have never cared what someone else's opinion of me was. I could give 0 you know whats
Hmm.
about what people think. And and that I think has served me so well in my life because if not for that, I think, you know, if I didn't have that piece of me, I don't think I would have explored half of the things I've done in my life. I don't think I would have stood up for half of the things that I've advocated for in my life. I don't think I would have gone as many adventures as I have in my life. um, and I just, when we're talking about putting ourselves out there, I mean, we've known each other for a while, and I have various social media outlets, and I have a personal TikTok page, and I have a clinic work TikTok page, and they are very, very vastly different. One is much more professional, and the other one is just, bunch of fuckery. It's just my personality. That's the acting part of me. That's the
Right.
funny part of me. That's the, and I am a strong, strong believer that people are allowed to have lives outside of their career.
Yeah.
People are allowed to leave the briefcase at the office and the slippers at home. And you can't change, you shouldn't be forced to intertwine those all the time if that's not something that works for you and speaks to
Right.
you. I mean, I know people who struggle greatly with this, that they think they have to keep this persona all the time of, well, I can't be associated with this person or with that venture or with this deal, because people are going to think of this of me when I get home. Well, but that's your home life. So, that this is your work life. I mean, you certainly wouldn't go into the office and bring a sippy cup to your meeting and sit everybody in a circle and hold hands to make a deal,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, why would you be expected to come home and have a dossier of dockets describing the meal you're going to have for dinner with your family? It
Right.
just
Right.
doesn't it doesn't work like
Right.
that. you know so
Yeah.
there are different aspects of yourself, and there are different facets of yourself that you have to be free with and explore. And I think that, you know uh, one of the things you touched on earlier is kind of people being a little bit sensitive nowadays, with too touchy with getting, it's great that we have this sort of movement of, exploring our feelings more, and it's more accepted, and it's a greater conversation. But I think the danger of that sometimes is delving too far, off the edge
Right.
into extremes where everyone's just offended about everything and everything,
Right.
just for the sake of being offended.
Right.
You know
Right.
and it's really easy to be offended behind a keyboard, right?
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So
Right.
I think that's one thing that we also have to be mindful of, is that is what is the truth of the situation? Are you being offended just to be offended? Is that really an offense against gender or race or history or this or that or the other thing? Is that really an offense, or did you just not like what you hear? Because if you didn't like what you hear, you can just scroll, because no one's asking for your opinion.
Right. Right. Yeah.
you
It's
know
true.
and so I think, people are allowed to have, a life outside of their work and their career, and you're allowed to explore all the different facets of who you are. And that comes into play when we talk about self-love, because if you suppress a part of yourself, that's either, if you're always the funny person and you're suppressing the serious part, that's going to be a danger to you. If you're
Right.
always, easygoing, but you suppress the creative part of you, that's a danger too. That's an internal toxicity that you need to escape from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know we were talking about, in terms of fears and relationships, and I want to talk about a little bit about you said you were making a change to your company name, so I want to touch on that too. But before I forget, because I'm just watching the time, and I'm mindful of your time, because I know your time is very valuable. But I wanted to just touch on a little bit relationship wise when we talk about fear. And you and I had a conversation earlier about the difference of fear, the difference that fear plays in men and women. And I think one of the key points that came up for us when we were having that discussion was that I think women want to be protected physically,
Mm.
and that's sort of a fear in a relationship, or a want or a need in a relationship. And men fear not being protected emotionally.
Yeah. Okay. I don't claim to be the ambassador for all men. Um, but in conversations that I've had, with a lot of guys, we may not talk about it direct, but there's an overall tone and theme,
Mm,
right? And I use this example, and I was thinking about this today actually. That like, how long does it take? I was asking some of the women that I work with, like, how long does it take for him? to get out of the car when he's in the driveway, right?
Mm.
Meaning this, like, is he hesitant to come in
The want to.
not knowing, okay, I don't know who I'm getting tonight. Like,
Mm.
what's going to be going on? Is she coming out with claws? Is it going to be soft and tender? Like, I don't know who this person is. Is it an emotional roller coaster? That stuff can be very draining. And
Yes, it can.
for a lot of guys, whether or not they say it or not, in our minds, and we think about going out we want to go out, we want to provide, we want to, go slay the dragon. We want that, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit, I believe, to the guys I know that's there, right? We want to be the hero, right?
Yeah. And I think
And
that's just inherent DNA. I think that's just
yeah,
part of our
yeah,
DNA.
and I know that gets debated. And like I said, I don't claim to be. I'm not going to claim to speak for all men because who am I to do that? I don't know enough of them to do that. But in theme, right?
Mm.
We 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 like to be that way,
Mhm.
and then and to be appreciated,
Yeah.
right? When I'm kicking it with the guys and we're talking at conferences and things like that, that theme of appreciation comes back, a lot because it goes to value,
Yeah.
goes to, oh, what I did was a good thing. And I tell the women that I work with, like, listen, we are very, very simple, very simple. And I was like, I say, if you want a man to do something, tell him he's good at it. If you tell him he's good at it, like, sincerely,
Mhm.
he's probably gonna. I said, tell him he's good at taking out the trash. He'll be at Home Depot buying new trash cans, with wheels on it. Just keep telling him, like, babe, you're the best taking out the trash. I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
He's going to take such pride in that because I think there's something in the power of a woman's voice. The
Mm.
power of approval in a woman's voice
Mhm.
is a game changer.
Absolutely.
it moves the world, right?
Mm.
There have been wars that have been fought because of a woman's voice. Like, it just has such influence. And I believe that a woman has the power to tear down her whole entire relationship with her words.
Mm.
But at the same time, she can build her relationship with her words too. So I think
Absolutely.
there's that, like, just there's this power, and I think that women have an incredible gift for that, for creating safety, whether it be
Mm.
in a spouse, in a sibling, in their child. I think women just
Yeah.
have the power to say something that just really touches the heart, like, in a different kind of way. It just touches the heart. And I think when we have a void of that in relationships, it puts us in a place where we're trying to figure out, well, what can I do? I,
Mm.
it's I'm afraid that nothing I'll do will be good enough, right? It goes back to, again, value.
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
just I'm not good enough for anything I do. She's going to complain, and then you know guys will shut it down, right? They
Then
become
you and
distant.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at that point too, guys tend to start assuming things and then playing out a situation before it's already even happened and determining the outcome, and then the woman's just sat there going, "Well, I just wanted to know what you wanted for dinner, and you've already determined that we're getting divorced." Like,
Right, right. Because now we go.
instead of talking about like why you're feeling upset and because maybe that person didn't know what they had said or did, right?
Yeah, we go on the defensive,
Mm,
and historically, in a lot of cases, guys will shut it down, right?
mm, mm,
And we're okay with that. And the reason I think that we're okay with that is because a lot of times our engagement with other men is side by side. It's not face to face.
mm,
And here's what I mean, right? When we're out with the guys, we'll do something. So we're all okay, we're out hunting. We're all looking out hunting, right? We're
mhm,
all we're playing playing video games, or we're, doing whatever we're doing, we're focused on the doing. And oh, by the way, we talk sideways, right? With very few words. We don't really have a lot of long dialogue. But the interaction with a woman tends to be face to face.
Mhm.
It tends to be, okay, I because we're coming from two different perspectives.
Mhm. And that's how we read you
Right.
too, right? I
Right.
mean, a conversation is very different over the phone than it is over FaceTime when I can see
Right.
every little facet of the way you say something. And I mean,
Right. Right.
I won't give away my tips and my tricks, but we know.
Right. Right. Listen, I'm around women a whole lot, so I do the same thing, right? So I think this is the power of it. I'm like, oh, being around women, it helps refine the conversation skills. So I'll say to someone in a heartbeat, like, listen, I'm going to listen to what you say. I'm going to listen to what you don't say. Like,
Mhm.
I work on hearing both now, right? We're just operating on a
Mhm.
different level.
And sometimes
But
that's more valuable when someone doesn't say something. You get
right.
more information out of that than you do when they
Yeah.
open their
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah. Um, so that safety thing is it's very big.
Mhm.
Uh, Generally, I don't think most men are gonna like expose that to say, listen, my heart feels vulnerable, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's gonna be it's not gonna typically be that kind of dialogue. It's not gonna be expressed that way.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the keys is understanding behavior. And I think this is like understanding what I call the power of the bar.
Mm.
And when I say the power of the bar is bars, restaurants, they're set up in such a way that a man can go into the bar, he can order a drink, order some food. There's going to be some nice person that delivers it, right?
Mhm.
Because that person wants a tip, right? So they want a return client. So the presentation is going to be, hey, Brian, good to see you again. How was work? There's going to be this conversation like curiosity, how are the kids doing? Blah, blah, blah. So this person is being attentive,
Mm.
they're being welcoming. Here's your drink, and
Mm.
they're reading me, right? To recognize, hmm, something's going on with him.
Mm.
Maybe I should just, hey, Brian, you're looking a little down today. Everything okay?
'Cause there's a certain level of being removed
Right,
from you
right,
personally to
right,
see to see you objectively.
right. And so I think strategically, when we look at one another with through the lens of customer service,
Mm.
right? Not so much what can I get out of you, but how can I be aware of what you need and actually serve you? Right? I think service is just such a big thing that
Yeah.
in relationships, if we're, I'm not talking about being beaten down, right?
Yeah.
A person, a waiter or a waitress, simply because they're serving, it doesn't make them inferior,
Mm.
right? That's not what that is. It puts them in a position actually of being very much aware and very caring, and they're serving with a hope and expectation that something is going to be returned, whether it's monetary or not, but they're hoping something's going to be returned. And I think there's nothing wrong with serving with a desire for a return. Right? I think that's very
Right.
healthy, right? Like here,
Mm.
but like becoming um, service driven, to be able to pay attention, to say, okay, let me not lead with, here's what I want from you. Because it would
Yeah.
seem
Yeah.
very awkward and weird if someone says,
Yeah.
hey, what's my tip going to be tonight?
Right.
Like, what? Wait, what are you
By the way, can I
saying?
get you a drink? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, like, that's
Yeah.
backwards,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
If it's,
Gary Vee talks a lot about that too. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, no, it's good.
Gary Vee's I'm not sure if you're aware of him, but he's
Yeah.
Okay, so he's like a shrewd business guy. He's a
Yeah.
really great person, and he wrote a book about how to maneuver the deal, and his strategy is most people go into something asking for something. He said my strategy is the flip side of that. I give, 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 then ask.
So you're talking about jab, jab, hook.
Jab, jab, hook. Yes, that's the
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of sort of I think what you're saying, is that, that how can I be of service to you? Like what's on your plate right now? Like,
Right.
how can I let me know what's going on in your world so
Yeah.
that I can know how to help.
It was that was a back to my being awkward around girls. What I figured out the difference between when I was young to now is I figured out how to serve first.
Mm.
Right. I used to wonder, like, what do guys say to girls? I didn't know. So I didn't even really talk to them. I was like, okay, that's not what I'm gonna do. But I figured out now I could talk to any woman in the entire world and not have a problem because there's something I can serve first.
Mm.
I don't have to take. I don't have to walk up and say, "Hey, what's your phone number?" No, that's me wanting first,
Mm.
right? Like if I can add something in terms of conversation or whatever it may be, let me bring value first,
Yeah.
and and make a connection more so than let me see if I can get something out of this. And I
Yeah.
think it applies day in, day out. You can use it with anyone. Service works, right? I think it is the number one relationship strategy that people don't actively use.
Mhm.
Like if you serve first, it
Yeah.
people's defenses go down, their trust levels go up, and then you have this, you have this way in that says, okay, we can establish something in a healthy way,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it's so important, and I think to go in with that ask first, with that how can I with that service mind, instead of being approached with a predetermined notion and having that thrown at you. I know, like for myself, I often get in terms of when we're talking about relationship stuff, I often hear, "Oh, you're intimidating." And that's usually one of the first things that I'm hit with. And I think, okay, well, so then you're never going to be proud of me. There's always going to be something that I'm going to do well that you'll be jealous of. Or you're never gonna, like, I'm never going to be good enough for you in your eyes because you'll never be proud of me because I'm just intimidating. And half the time they don't even know what that means, the value of what they're saying when they say that. And it's like, well, okay, but knowing what I know and being who I am and being confident and being strong, that's not intimidating. That's standing in my truth.
Right.
And when you talk about, coming up with service, just I think being able to look at someone and saying, "How can I help you? What do you need?" Like that's a far better approach than saying, um, you look this way or you're this way, or like having that predetermined, notion thrown at you.
Right.
Um, because I think that right away kind of sets a barrier for a relationship. And
Yeah.
we're talking about, feeling emotionally safe. I think that it speaks true to women too. I mean, I mean, as much as we want the physical safety, in a relationship and a partnership, we also want to feel emotionally safe too. And I think that's so. I think it's an equal partnership for men and women in that space, in that
Truly.
regard.
Yeah. It is. I think the power of being emotionally safe and what it does for the physical,
Mm,
um, like to I call it having a place to rest your head,
mm.
right? Right.
Soft place to fall.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
listen, can I take off my armor with you?
Mm,
Right?
yes.
Like can I take off my
Yes.
armor with you and be vulnerable? Meaning,
Yes.
like, I don't have to worry about you being the one that's gonna, like, attack me. Like, we can have conversations. Yeah,
Mm.
we're gonna have struggles, you know, and all that. But
Or hold it against
ultimately,
you later
yeah, like,
on.
ultimately, can I think to have the place where you take off your armor,
Mm.
you're not feeling like you need to be on the defense, and like, I can rest here
Mm.
and be totally safe. Like,
Yes.
guys guys want that too, right? That's
Yeah.
not just a feminine thing. So that emotional safety leads to an actual physical safety
Mm.
that, I mean, is second to none.
Mhm.
To
Mhm.
know, okay, I can take off my armor, right?
Yeah.
And just to touch on something you said about when someone calling you intimidating, I would say, that when someone calls you intimidating, it's generally going to be because they're not as strong. And so
Mm.
something about your strength intimidates them because they haven't worked up to that level. And what I found was, I saw this play out in the gym, where the women that I was working with and training, as they became physically stronger and they were moving around weight and doing different things, and their confidence was growing, and they started to establish this standard of what they expected,
Mm.
people would tell them they're intimidating. And that intimidation comes from, I haven't equipped myself and prepared myself for everything that you are. Like, you're smart, you are articulate, you are driven, you are focused, you have these goals, you have these achievements, you're forward moving. Like, oh, that's a lot. So for that, your intimidation factor actually is an acknowledgement of your standard, which someone in their mind, they're saying, I don't meet up to that standard. So
Mm.
that intimidates me because I don't feel like I meet her standard. But conversely, you meet someone different and you're not intimidating, it's completely attractive.
They're
Like,
proud of you. Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's so attractive because all the same things. You're driven and you're articulate and you're courageous and you're bold and creative, brilliant. So all that stuff, it then comes into play, and someone who is prepared differently looks at you and then they admire it. And
Mm.
so again, with the fear factor, I'm glad you brought that up because it's one of those subtle things that get said
Mm.
that can cause us to question ourselves. And I think more so for women than men with that one. Like, a lot of women, they hear that you're intimidating, and I've seen where the woman tends to feel like she needs to start, oh, maybe I'm
Mm.
too strong, maybe I'm
Mhm.
too smart, maybe I'm too assertive. No, 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 no. Don't let that person's, their description of you and the tone in which they described you change you, because
Mm.
their tone doesn't take away from what they acknowledge as being like completely awesome about you.
It's a strange dichotomy because, that you're faced with this, you get this thrown at you, this you're intimidating, you're strong, you're this, you're that, and the other thing. But you're also like, well, I'm me and I'm human, and
Right.
and you have, you go through your things, and so you have, times when you have a vulnerable moment and you're upset or you're hurt or you're, anxious or whatever. And then that too is looked down upon because then you're not that strong person anymore. Now you're this weak person,
Right.
or and now they have to, like, it's just such a strange, like, wishy-washy kind of like thought process. And it's just and I just think that finding that, as we talked about, that emotional safety, or being able to let down your armor,
Yeah.
as you said,
Yeah.
and just being able to, like, have that person who supports you when you're up here and hug you when you're down here,
Yeah.
and not be looking to take advantage of that or use it against you. I think
Right.
that's just such a powerful thing in a relationship. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always recommend and I always say, and one of my 4 keys to a successful relationship is that it's important to be friends.
Mhm.
It's important to be friends in a relationship. I think that's so key. I mean, listen, love is fleeting, right? We can love something, we can not love something, we can be in love with something, we can fall out of love with something. Love can be here, there, existent, not existent. But when you have a foundation of respect and love and friendship and camaraderie, it's so much harder to break the walls of concrete than it is to sink in sand. I just so I just think that emotional safety is so key.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
But
It's
I wanna touch on before we go, I wanna touch on, your business and the new things that are happening, and, you said you had a name change, a possible new name coming up, so tell us
yeah.
all about it.
This is actually in, real time, so you're getting it ahead of
Okay.
things actually being done. Um, Relation Fit Farms is I had a moment where I sat and had to have a real, like, honest moment with myself, and I
Mhm.
said, if if you're having your last moments, will you regret not making this change? And my answer to that was yes,
Mm.
because I was trying to figure things out, and I'd been, had some experiences and business partners and divorce, and a lot of stuff had happened all at the same time. And I had a vision for my women's empowerment, and and it was segmented. Things were segmented, and so I'm actually in the process of changing the name, and really going full in on it, on it being Cinderella Strong Farms.
Nice.
And because my women's empowerment program is called Cinderella Strong,
Mhm.
and it has different aspects to it, working with young girls, and women of all ages. And for me, the Cinderella movie has been so instrumental
Yeah.
in my own healing and transformation that it didn't need to be separate, right? People oftentimes ask me, like, well, why don't you work with men? Like, I will, but honestly, analytically, when I look at the analytics, 70 to 80% of the people I engage with are
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
So, you know, I, eh, from a business standpoint, like, okay, no, I found those that receive me and accept me, and 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 when I'm teaching and training, it helps to bring clarity,
Mm.
right? And for even though I've been doing this for a number of years now, I had paused on changing the name for, like, this fear of, like, well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And and it just, I was tired of that. I was tired of the of it being segmented. See, what I recognized was that the fear of what people would think about it, specifically men, what men would think about it, even though as often as I do events and have programming at the farm, women are the ones that show up. Women show up
Mm.
for, women ask me about, can we come there and do, have a girlfriend event or a mommy's event,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Can we do mommy and me? So there, women were still the ones predominantly that were showing up, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the question of what about men had been keeping me from it, and fear can cause our lives to be segmented in a way that stagnates our growth.
Absolutely.
And 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 so, by in making the change and saying, okay, this is what it is, like, I was out today actually, like, doing some painting and changing the colors, and, like, just getting, decorating and doing some things, planting
Yeah.
flowers, because I want the experience always to be, one where, it's that, like, very warm, very welcoming to the
Magical.
women. Yeah, like, magical for the women that I serve.
Yeah.
And
It's a
and
great
and
opportunity to do a daddy-daughter thing too, so
absolutely. And
yeah.
and and I always tell people that Cinderella Strong doesn't exclude men because I'm a man.
Yeah.
Like, it's I always say it's my story that I share with women.
Well, there's a prince in the story, so
Absolutely. There are a lot of men in the story
yeah.
that have really tremendous roles,
Mhm.
but it's really all about transformation,
Yeah.
right? The story itself is about transformation, and the story's impact on my life and what it's caused for business has been about transformation.
Yeah.
And so the farm itself, when people have an experience there and have it, are part of an event here at the farm, then I want it to be transformational, where someone
Yeah.
can say, I had an experience that changed my life for the good, right? My pumpkin could become a carriage. And now I get to use
Yeah.
all the themes that are
Yes.
throughout the movie,
Right.
right, in the farm. Because clearly, if you've ever seen the movie, there are lots of animals
Lots
like
of farm animals.
throughout. So that's a big part of the story, and I get to use that and teach from it. So I'm really excited about the shift and the change, and really just bringing it all together, the empowerment for women and for families, for everyone, but primarily focused on impacting women's lives.
That's so exciting. Well, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful that you found the strength to move through that fear and really claim what speaks to you on a personal level. So that's
Yeah,
phenomenal, and that's going to really make such a huge difference not only in your life but in the lives of a lot of other people. So, I mean, you always already doing phenomenal work, and I mentioned this before, but every time I see a message from you, and I would consider myself fairly scholarly, and every time I see a message from you, I think, "Shit, I just got schooled." You definitely have a way of speaking in parables and teaching us life lessons, and I think it's fantastic. So tell people where they can find you on your social media and contact before we go.
well, on TikTok, I'm doing a lot with TikTok, and that's
Yeah,
B.A. Sheppard. That's two P's, A.R.D. Um, and on Instagram, it's B.A. Shep, just two P's. And then on Facebook, if people want to connect with me there, I'm doing some different things on Facebook, but you can connect with me via what will be Cinderella Strong Farms on Facebook, and my name, Brian Shepherd, there. Um, and as well on YouTube, B.A. Shepherd on YouTube. So,
fantastic.
yeah, those are just the ways to connect. And, I appreciate you having me on. I enjoy our time together. There are some real nuggets in there that I can't wait to write down, just to capture. I'm gonna have to watch it again just because there were some things I was like, oh, I wanted to take notes when you were talking, but I was trying to stay dialed in. But I'm like, that's a note. I need that. But I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to more opportunities to connect with you and work with you and serve your community because you're doing a fantastic job and impacting lives.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. And then likewise, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really value our connection. And it's great to talk to you again. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining me tonight. And I will
You're
post
welcome.
this on our YouTube and on the podcast. So I'll let you know when it's up, and you can share it with people. And I hope it brings a lot of value to a lot of people, and I know it will. So thanks again for
Awesome,
joining me
awesome.
tonight. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a good night.